Tennessee basketball is headed to its third straight Sweet 16 for the first time in program history. Welcome into Off the Hook Sports, everybody. I am Caleb Calhoun, broadcasting you live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio. The show brought to you by Banks & Jones, and the Vols beat the UCLA Bruins 67-58 in a game that, quite honestly, wasn't even that close. Tennessee, after having a dogfight with UCLA through most of the first half, ended up going on an 8-0 run to finish the first half, and then built up nearly a 20-point lead in the second half and took complete control of the game. As a result, the Vols are now headed to the Sweet 16. Guys, this win can't be understated, and here's why. I have to reroute what I was saying earlier in the week. I said Tennessee's a lock for the Sweet 16, and if they get past the Sweet 16, they're going to the Final Four. I stand by that. UCLA was a more imposing opponent for Tennessee than I thought they would be, and here's why. UCLA against Utah State in their 72-47 win, which was significantly larger than Tennessee's 77-62 win over Wofford, suggested one, they were a better team than we thought, and two, they had adjusted and found new ways to win, because in that game they brought A.D. Merritt in the game, and they had A.D. Merritt and Tyler Bilodeau playing together, and they used their size as a huge advantage. Mick Cronin, to his credit, coaching wise, thought that he should stick with that in this game. And I said that would be a concern because Rick Barnes has a bad history coaching against teams with two bigs in a game. And this Tennessee team is not equipped to handle that. And so UCLA early on had Bilodeau and A.D. Merritt in the game together. And I thought, again, Tennessee could be in trouble. Well, Rick Barnes adjusted in a big way. He put on a press that I hadn't seen him put on in a long time, honestly. I don't think he's put it on all year this year. He put it on some last year with the Dawn Connect team, but he hadn't put it on a lot this year. And he did a 2-1-2 press, I guess is what you would call it, where they would trap at the half court if they could. And that broke open the first half, which is why Tennessee went on the 8-0 run to go up 32-25 at halftime. They built that lead up in the second half and took a completely dominant performance. It took a close game and turned it into a dominant performance. And with the result, Tennessee won 67-58. They kind of ran out the clock in the end. They were willing to let time run out and let UCLA get back in the game. Major props to the way Tennessee played. And I want to point this out. Benjamin Watkins has a great point. He says, I like how we just knew that we were better the last 6 minutes and pretty much quit playing basketball and run clock, still win by 9. That's pretty impressive. You're right, Benjamin. Tennessee had complete control of the game. That 9-point win, it's not really a 9-point win. It's a 20-point win. Tennessee was saving energy towards the end. Okay, and that really speaks to what they needed to do. Major credit to Chaz Lanier. I want to point this out with Chaz Lanier. I talked about UCLA's interior presence and how Barnes struggles with two bigs, and I thought that could be an issue. Well, the way they play the matchup zone sometimes with Mick Cronin and the multiple defensive schemes they throw in led me to believe that Tennessee could have some trouble trying to find ways to score, particularly with Chaz Lanier, who has had great success in space throughout the year. And Wofford, with their man-to-man defense and players too slow to play it, they were going to allow Lanier to have success in space. UCLA wasn't going to allow that. They were going to play that matchup zone and the compact zone inside the paint. And Lanier still found ways to score. He went 4 of 5 from 3, 4-4 from the free throw line, had 20 points. Major kudos to Lanier. In the process, by the way, Lanier set the Tennessee single-season record. He broke Chris Lofton's record for three-pointers made in the game. He was 2 away going into the game, so he broke it by 2 by hitting 4 threes. Kudos to Chaz Lanier for doing that. That's an incredible stat. That's an incredible record to break. Obviously, we know Chris Lofton's situation his last year at Tennessee. If he didn't have testicular cancer, he probably would have done a little bit more than he did, and it would be a more impossible record to break. But Chaz Lanier still gets the credit for what he did. Zakai Ziegler balling out, 15 points, 6 assists, 5 of 5 from the free throw line, 2 of 6 from the three-point line. He did what he needed to do, and off the bench, Jordan Gainey continued to be an offensive scoring force with 13 points. The bigs weren't that much of a factor, but it didn't matter. Rick Barnes, the reason the bigs weren't that much of a factor is Rick Barnes decided to turn up the tempo and turn up the athleticism with UCLA choosing to go big. And here's the crazy part, guys, and this is a major testament to Barnes. UCLA has the guards to play quick. What we learned in this game is UCLA doesn't have the guards to play quick. They don't have enough guards to play quick if they're going to play big. And they tried to play big, and they tried to out-muscle Tennessee underneath. Not necessarily a bad strategy, but Barnes showed he wasn't afraid to turn up the tempo and press, and we got to give him a lot of credit for that. I mean, UCLA did only have 11 turnovers, but quite honestly, they probably would have only had 5 if it wasn't for him turning up that tempo. And it altered everything UCLA wanted to do. Barnes decided to play a little more transition. And this is something I've been bringing up for a while now. A lot of people think that this Tennessee basketball team, with the tempo on KenPom ratings and on possessions per 40 minutes, that's outside of the top 300 in college basketball. They're one of the slowest paced teams. That doesn't always mean they can't run and they can't turn up the tempo. This has been a staple of Rick Barnes for a long time, is people think that he just stubbornly plays slow. Last year's team was one of the faster teams in college basketball. This year's team was a slower team that we didn't know if they could turn up the tempo if they needed to. But he decided to turn up the tempo when it mattered. And that's a major testament to Barnes and a major testament to this Tennessee team that we didn't see coming. And with that, they took complete control of the game because we found out UCLA could do one of two things. They could either outmuscle Tennessee in the paint, or they could outquick Tennessee with the guard play. But they couldn't do both. And whichever one they couldn't do, Tennessee was going to use to their advantage. And in this game, UCLA decided to try to play tougher in the paint. So Tennessee turned up the tempo, and it worked to their advantage. And we're talking about an 8-0 run to end the first half. And when you had a 3-0 run at the start of the second half, they had an 11-0 run to build a 10-point lead. And they just stayed in complete control of the game after that. And we got to give Tennessee a ton of credit for the way they handled that. This was a game. I want to give myself props, but I can't. Because what I told you guys earlier in the week was that I thought Tennessee was a lock for the Sweet 16. And then I wrote a column changing my mind after watching how UCLA beat Utah State and how Tennessee beat Wofford. And I thought, the Tennessee team may be tired. This UCLA team may be better than we thought. They may have figured it out. They have a size advantage with A.D. Mara, which was not in the scouting report during the regular season. I thought all of that, and I didn't know how Tennessee would handle that. They had to turn up the tempo in this game. They did, and they took complete control. And we pointed out what Benjamin Watson said. Foxtown says the same thing, saying, I think they could have won by higher, but they were just ready to be done with the game. You're absolutely right, Foxtown, and this is the point. Tennessee took complete control of this game in the second half. This game was over by, I'm going to say, the 10-minute mark. By the 10-minute mark, this game was over. Tennessee was up by 16. UCLA wasn't coming back, and everybody in the world knew UCLA wasn't coming back. And so that's a major testament to Tennessee with what they were able to do. They are now headed to the Sweet 16. They will play the winner between Illinois and Kentucky. That should be their toughest matchup. I still maintain that Tennessee has a clear path to the Final Four, in the sense that if they get to the Elite Eight, I think they're a lock for the Final Four. I'll be honest. I just think they have a better matchup with Houston, who struggled to put away Gonzaga today. Gonzaga almost came back and won that game after Houston had the lead for most of the game. And I honestly think that Tennessee is going to be in great shape to make sure that they could potentially get to their first Final Four. It's, again, that Sweet 16 matchup is the big deal. They were swept by Kentucky, but they did beat Illinois on the road, and they could be better than Kentucky. What they showed in this game, though, with UCLA, and this is the big point, they can handle complex defenses. Rick Barnes' offenses have a history of struggling in weird moments and in problematic moments, particularly against complex defenses. They didn't do that in this game, and you have to give them credit. Yes, they only scored 67 points. They could have scored 75. It was just they kind of they took their foot off the gas in the last 5 minutes, which I get. They need some rest. Beyond all of the scorers who deserve credit, by the way, Ziegler had 3 steals and 6 assists along with his double-figure scoring, and we already mentioned Gainey and Lanier. The post-game was a little bit absent, but that had a lot to do with the size UCLA went with, so Tennessee had to turn up the tempo, so we're not going to knock that too much this game like we did last. Felix Opera still had a block, 4 points. Chaz Lanier had 4 points, a steal, an assist, and 7 rebounds. Both Lanier and Opera had 7 rebounds. Off the bench, Cade Phillips had 5 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. By the way, I want to point this out for a minute because Caleb Phillips got in foul trouble early. Horribly officiated game, guys. Horribly officiated game. This was the type of game where when you talk about one shining moment, the officials see it as their one shining moment as much as the players do. They wanted to be stars and they overcalled everything in the first half, and that was not conducive to what Tennessee wanted to do. But that's also conducive to Rick Barnes being much better at X's and O's and adjusting to talent than we thought. Because again, he turned up the tempo, he turned up the press, and that's how he countered that. And that's major, major props to him. I want to point out that Chad Morris says could have won by 20 easily, playing with their food to conserve energy. You're absolutely right. Turned up the press in the second half. Tennessee looks impressive. Exactly. The minute Tennessee played tempo, they won. And I'm going to write a column on that. Tennessee proved that they can run tempo if needed. Okay. And so I got to say, Tennessee gets a ton of credit for that specific thing. Tennessee, they did their job and they did what they needed to do. And the press and the tempo that they turned up, quite honestly, warrants a ton of credit. No one thought that was coming. I'm going to go a little personal real quick. I think there's somebody I know real quick, and it's a guy named Dylan. Dylan says, I saw someone saying you weren't from Memphis. I know you're an OG, though. We played baseball in the Cove in the neighborhood off Kirby in the 90s. You were the biggest UT fan then and now. Dylan, is this Dylan Porter? If this is Dylan Porter, let me know. Are you Joseph Tyler Rico's cousin? I just want to know. Let me know. You may or may not be, but I think I know who you are. And wow, that's epic that you're on this chat. Awesome. Timothy McGee says, hey, Negative Nancy, how are you doing? Timothy, everything I said still stands. I didn't know Tennessee could turn up the tempo on this. I really didn't. And so I was really concerned about this UCLA matchup. And the Wofford win was concerning with the way they played perimeter defense. But I also have to be conscious of the fact that Tennessee did play well when it mattered most, and it did feel like they were conserving energy for Wofford, but I wasn't sure. So yeah, I thought there was plenty of reason to be scared about UCLA. I'll take the L. I was wrong. Tennessee knew what they were doing. They were conserving energy, and I'll give them the credit where it matters. And Foxtown jumps in and says, Caleb, you know this. When this team is completely focused, I mean, legit focused, they're dominating. I agree. Dylan jumps in again and says, yes, sir. Dylan, great to see you. Great to see you. For those who don't know, Dylan Porter and I have a relationship that goes back to when we were 10, or maybe I was 12 and he was 10. Maybe I was 10, he was 8. I can't remember. Like, we were very similar in age, and we played baseball on the Cove down the road from us in Memphis. So that's pretty epic. Love seeing you on the show, Dylan. Love seeing you. I really, really appreciate that. Really appreciate seeing you on the show. Tim said, a win is a win. Now, matter if it by 7 or 15. Now, again, Timothy, let's be fair here. A win is not a win, okay? You don't accept things in a win you wouldn't accept in a loss. And there were things that Wofford did in the loss. I'm sorry, in their loss to Tennessee. There are things that Tennessee did in their win over Wofford that, to be fair, you wouldn't have accepted otherwise had they lost. And that was concerning for this game. So Tennessee, give them a ton of credit for how they did this game. They had look, I'm objective. I do nothing but cheerleader columns when I think they're doing well, and I will criticize them when I think they're doing poorly. And I criticize them for the win over Wofford, even though they won by 15. I give them all the credit in the world for the win over UCLA. And you know who agrees with me on both of those? Vegas. Vegas had Tennessee favored by 18.5 against Wofford. They only won by 15. Vegas only had Tennessee favored by 4.5 against UCLA. They won by 9. So, yeah, I'm much more impressed by Tennessee's win over UCLA than the win over Wofford. And I think there's a lot more to be excited about. And I am the first to say that Tennessee played much, much, much better than the 9-point win indicated. Okay. And I think that Rick Barnes showed a new layer to what he was able to do by turning up the tempo and putting on the press at the end of the first half. I actually called for taking Igor Milicic out at that point and going Zakai Ziegler, Chaz Lanier, Jemai Meshack, and Jordan Gainey, and playing a 4-guard set and turning up the tempo and going press, because I felt that the traps and the half-court game right there, the traps at the half-court and the full-on 2-1-2 press was going to give UCLA trouble. I didn't know that going in. Look, Will West and I talked about this on Friday, and Dave was on. Their guards are quick. Their guards are very athletic. My issue is that I didn't know if Tennessee could hang with the bigs and the athletic guards at the same time. What I didn't realize with this game was that UCLA couldn't put those things together at the same time. They either had to play big or they had to use the athletic guards. Mick Cronin at UCLA decided to play big. I don't blame him. A.D. Miro had 10 points, 5 blocks in the first game. He did have 3 blocks in this game. Tennessee's inside game has been questionable with Igor Milicic and Felix Opera. So he decided to go with A.D. Miro and Tyler Bilodeau together down low. Tennessee decided, you know what? You're going to do that? We're going to turn up the tempo. And they showed we can turn up the tempo, even though we're outside of the top 300 in tempo, Ken Palm adjusted rating through the year. They decided they could turn up the tempo if they needed to, and they did, and that's how they won the game. Shows another element to their game. Here's the biggest deal of this, and this is the most important part of this for Tennessee. They're now off for at least, it's Saturday, they're off for at least 5 days. That's huge, okay, because they've just played their 4th game within a week since last Saturday. From the SEC tournament, which I said they shouldn't have gone that deep in, to now. It's a huge deal that they're now being able to get 5 days rest. Whether they play Kentucky or Illinois, this team is very good and only goes 7 deep, and I think it's crucial that they get the 5 days rest. So I'm going to give them a huge benefit now. Again, the Sweet 16 is their toughest hurdle to the Final Four. Kentucky and Illinois are tough matchups for them. I'd rather Tennessee. I'll just tell you this right now. This is my hot take. If I'm Tennessee, I don't know if you guys were watching Gonzaga and Houston. That game ended during halftime of the Tennessee-UCLA game. Houston won. If I'm Tennessee, I'm kind of happy Houston won. I'd rather play Houston than Gonzaga with the tempo. Tennessee continues to show that against slow-paced teams, they can dominate. They clearly could have dominated UCLA tonight and didn't do it as much as they needed to do. So I don't think it's a big deal. Chad Morris says, if we get Illinois, I like it. If we get Kentucky, I really like it. Chad, be careful with Kentucky, okay? They've gotten Tennessee twice this year. Vol for Life asked, who do you want to win, Kentucky or Illinois? I think you want Illinois to win. Tennessee beat Illinois at Illinois with Brad Underwood. Illinois has been wildly inconsistent. I don't think Illinois can actually beat Tennessee on a neutral court. And also, the only thing I would say is you're not going to get a home court advantage either way in Indianapolis between Illinois or Kentucky. So I think it's just straight up matchups. I think Tennessee has the advantage. Brad Underwood goes a typical standard man-to-man, and Chaz Lanier is going to get more space against Illinois. Mick Cronin is more of a defensive wizard, so he can do a matchup zone, and Chaz Lanier could struggle in those situations. You want the situations that allow Chaz Lanier to score the most, okay? And I think a typical standard man-to-man is the thing that helps the most, and that's what Illinois plays. So in that regard, I would argue that you want Illinois to beat Kentucky. Doesn't mean they can't beat Kentucky, but I mean, Kentucky did sweep them this year, and they did beat Illinois at Illinois. So Foxtown points out, once that big of theirs became sus, it was a done deal. Yep, no, you're right. The UCLA kept this close because they ran 2 bigs, and Tennessee wasn't prepared for that for a while. Rick Barnes made an adjustment immediately. Credit to him for doing some scouting. He did some scouting with the Utah State game, and he saw what they were doing, and he knew what they were trying to pull off. And he said, this is not going to work. And so he turned up the tempo. He clearly threw this wrinkle into the team in like a day, okay? You got to give him a lot of credit for that. For people who think that Rick Barnes is not an X's and O's guy and is just a developer of talent, which, by the way, might have been me. Yep, you know what? Maybe we were wrong. That was a heck of an adjustment. The best adjustment I've seen in this NCAA tournament so far. So major kudos to Rick Barnes on that. And major kudos to Tennessee for adjusting. We're going to obviously be back on Monday to cover more of this and more college football news. You know, we are the home for your best and most objective college football coverage at Off the Hook Sports. I am Caleb Calhoun. We will be back with Dave at 10 a.m. Eastern. Please hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell, turn the notifications on, tell a friend. Again, we're building something great at Off the Hook Sports. We're going to cover more of this on Monday, but for now, enjoy it. It's a Saturday night. It's a late Saturday night. It's 12:50. Guys, I am tired. I am running on a lot of coffee. I'm not even going to lie to you. I'm running on a ton of coffee right now. And so, again, major congratulations to Tennessee for winning this game and reaching their third straight Sweet 16 in school history. We will be back Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern time to cover more of this game, more of what happens on Sunday. So many things going on. It is March Madness, which, as I say, as I'm still a grump, is exciting for all the wrong reasons. But that is what it is. So you guys have a great day. Again, the show brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Play to win. Broadcasting to you live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln studio with Caleb Calhoun. This has been a special presentation of Off the Hook Sports. You guys have a great rest of your night. And if you are not like me, and if you have no obligations, go out and party. Have some fun. Unfortunately, I have obligations. I'm kidding. I love my obligations. But I do need to get sleep to be able to meet them. So you guys have a great rest of your night. We will be back on Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern. And also check out allthehooksports.com. I have some columns coming up tonight, and so does Dave. And we'll have more tomorrow. So we got a lot to write about. So again, you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Again, with Caleb Calhoun, this has been a presentation of